I walked into my apartment on Christmas Eve, arms full of groceries for a dinner I'd be eating alone. My phone sat silent on the counter, no missed calls, no texts, nothing. My family was gathering at my parents' house just 20 minutes away, and I wasn't invited. This wasn't a miscommunication. This was deliberate. My name is Elena Rothman, and I'm 32 years old. For the past 3 years, I've been the black sheep of my family for one reason. I refused to enable my older brother Marcus's destructive behavior. He was 40, chronically unemployed, and had been living off my parents for over a decade. Every family gathering turned into a Marcus appreciation session where everyone pretended his failures were just bad luck. When I called it out last Thanksgiving, suggesting he needed to take responsibility for his life instead of draining our aging parents' retirement fund, I became the villain. My mother called me cruel. My father said I lacked compassion. My younger sister Vanessa accused me of being jealous of the attention Marcus received. It was absurd, but that's how it went. After that dinner, the invitations stopped. Birthday parties, Sunday dinners, Easter brunch, all suddenly intimate family-only affairs that somehow didn't include me. But Christmas? That stung differently. I'd hoped that maybe, just maybe, the holidays would soften their stance. I even texted my mother a week before, asking if I should bring anything to Christmas dinner. She left me on read. 3 days later, I saw Vanessa's Instagram story, a boomerang of wrapped presents under my parents' tree with the caption, "Can't wait for Christmas, with my favorite people." The message was clear. So there I was, microwaving a frozen lasagna on Christmas Eve, scrolling through social media watching everyone else's perfect family moments, when my phone finally rang. Unknown number. Elena Rothman, a professional voice asked. Speaking. This is Catherine Brennan from Brennan and Associates Law Firm. I'm calling regarding the estate of your late grandmother, Diane Rothman. My heart stopped. I'm sorry, what? My grandmother passed away. There was a pause. You weren't informed? I apologize. Mrs. Rothman passed 3 weeks ago. The family arranged a small private service. 3 weeks. They'd buried my grandmother 3 weeks ago and never told me. My hands shook as I gripped the phone. Why are you calling me? You're named as a beneficiary in her will. We need to schedule a meeting to discuss the details. Are you available December 27th? I agreed, barely processing the conversation. After we hung up, I sat in stunned silence. My grandmother, the woman who taught me to bake, who called me every Sunday, who told me I reminded her of herself, was gone. And my family had intentionally kept it from me. I didn't sleep that night. Christmas Day passed in a blur. I kept checking my phone, irrationally hoping someone would reach out, explain, apologize. Nothing came. December 27th arrived. I walked into Catherine Brennan's office in downtown Charlotte, a sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. She was a sharp woman in her 50s with kind eyes that had seen too many family disputes. Thank you for coming, Elena, she said, gesturing to a leather chair. I want to start by saying I'm sorry for your loss. Your grandmother spoke very highly of you. You knew her. I handled her estate planning for 15 years. She updated her will 6 months ago, specifically because of concerns about her family dynamics. Catherine opened a thick folder. Elena, your grandmother left you her entire estate. I blinked. I'm sorry, what? Her house in Davidson, her investment portfolio, her savings accounts, everything. The total value is approximately $3.7 million. The room tilted. But, my parents. Marcus, that doesn't make sense. Catherine slid a document across the desk. She left letters explaining her decision. She discovered that your brother had been forging her signature to take out loans against her property. When she confronted your parents about it, they asked her to let it go, to not press charges because it would ruin Marcus's life. She was devastated by their willingness to enable his theft. My grandmother's handwriting covered the pages before me. I recognized the elegant script immediately. My dearest Elena, it began. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and I imagine your family hasn't treated you well in my absence. I need you to know the truth about why you've been excluded, and why I've made the decisions I have regarding my estate. The letter detailed everything. How Marcus had stolen her checkbook 2 years ago and written himself $40,000 in checks. How he'd taken out a home equity loan against her house by forging documents, leaving her with nearly $200,000 in debt she didn't know existed until the bank contacted her. How my parents had discovered this and, instead of holding Marcus accountable, had asked her to stay quiet. They'd even suggested she was being dramatic about the situation. My grandmother had been horrified. She'd hired Catherine, secured her assets, and pressed charges. But the stress had taken its toll on her health. The family blamed me for her changed attitude, claiming my negative influence had made her turn against them. She wanted you to know, Catherine continued, that she tried repeatedly to contact you after your falling out with your parents, but they intercepted her calls and messages. Your mother told her you'd changed your number and didn't want contact. Rage burned through my grief. So they isolated us from each other. Yes. Your grandmother only discovered this 3 months before she passed when a neighbor helped her use Facebook. She saw you'd been posting, clearly still using your phone. That's when she understood the full extent of the manipulation. Catherine handed me another document. She left you this house and these assets with one request, that you use them to build the life you deserve, free from people who would hold you back. I left that office in a daze, my grandmother's letters clutched to my chest, legal documents proving Marcus's fraud in my bag. That night, I sat in my apartment and cried for her, for the lost time, for the family that had betrayed both of us. But then I started planning. New Year's Eve was 5 days away. My grandmother's house, now my house, sat on 2 acres of prime Davidson real estate with a view of Lake Norman. It was a stunning craftsman-style home she'd lovingly maintained, and it was empty. I made calls. I hired caterers. I contacted event planners. I reached out to friends I'd neglected while dealing with family drama. My college roommate Jennifer, who'd become a successful photographer, my former colleague David, who now ran a nonprofit, my gym friend Sarah, who was a local news anchor. I invited 20 people who actually valued me. I didn't post about it on social media. I didn't mention it to anyone connected to my family. I simply planned the perfect New Year's Eve celebration. December 31st arrived cold and clear. The house looked magical. String lights wrapped around the porch columns. A catering company had transformed the dining room into an elegant buffet, and a bartender mixed craft cocktails in the kitchen. My guests arrived in cocktail attire, and the house filled with warmth, laughter, and genuine affection, things that had been missing from family gatherings for years. At 9 p.m., Sarah pulled me aside. Elena, I'm sorry, but my producer just called. We're covering the charity gala downtown, and guess who's there? She showed me her phone. The local news was streaming live from a fundraiser at the Marriott. And there, front and center in the crowd shot, were my parents and Vanessa, dressed to the nines, schmoozing with Charlotte's elite. They're talking about their philanthropic work, Sarah said, looking uncomfortable. Your mom just gave an interview about family values. The irony was suffocating. Do you want me to kill the feed? Sarah asked. An idea formed. No. Actually, can you do me a favor? Can you mention that you're heading to a private estate party after this and maybe show up here with your camera crew? Sarah's eyes widened. You want to be on the news? I want the truth to come out. I showed her my grandmother's letters, explained the whole situation. Sarah had known my grandmother. Everyone in Davidson knew Diane Rothman. She'd been a beloved community figure. Give me 30 minutes, Sarah said, already texting her producer. At 11 p.m., Sarah arrived with her cameraman. But she didn't come for a puff piece. She came because her producer had been a friend of my grandmother's and was outraged by the story. They wanted to do it right. We're here at the historic Rothman estate in Davidson, Sarah began, standing on the front porch, where Elena Rothman is hosting an intimate New Year's Eve celebration. But this isn't just any party. This is a homecoming. 3 weeks ago, Elena's grandmother, the beloved Diane Rothman, passed away. The family held a private funeral that Elena wasn't informed about, part of a year-long estrangement. What the family didn't expect was that Mrs. Rothman had left her entire estate to Elena after discovering that family members had committed financial fraud against her. The camera panned to show the house, the celebration, and then cut to an interview with me in my grandmother's study, surrounded by her books and photographs. I told the truth. All of it. I showed the legal documents on camera, Marcus's forged signatures, the fraudulent loans, the police reports my grandmother had filed. I read excerpts from her letters describing the betrayal and my parents' complicity. I explained how they'd isolated us from each other and blamed me for her change in attitude. My grandmother was the strongest person I knew, I said, my voice steady despite the emotion. She taught me that integrity matters more than keeping peace. That's why I'm speaking out now. Not for revenge, but because she deserves to have the truth known. And because other families dealing with financial abuse need to know they're not alone. The segment was supposed to air as a brief New Year's Eve human interest story. Instead, it went viral. By midnight, my phone was exploding. Not with Happy New Year texts, but with messages from people who'd seen the broadcast. Local news stations were requesting interviews. The story had been picked up by regional outlets. My grandmother's name was trending on Charlotte Twitter. And then my family started calling. I ignored the first dozen calls. At 12:30 a.m., as my guests counted down to the new year on the porch overlooking the lake, my mother left a voicemail I'd never forget. "How dare you," she hissed. "How dare you air our private family business on television? You've humiliated us. Everyone at the gala saw it. Do you have any idea what you've done? Marcus is devastated. Your father is getting calls from his business partners. You need to retract everything immediately. No apology for hiding my grandmother's death. No acknowledgement of the fraud. No remorse for cutting me out. Just anger that I'd exposed them." Vanessa texted, "You're dead to this family. Hope your inheritance was worth it." I blocked them all. The new year arrived with champagne toasts and genuine hugs from people who cared about me. Jennifer gave a speech about how I was the most loyal friend she'd ever had. David thanked me for inspiring his work with fraud victims. Sarah promised to follow up on the story and help raise awareness about elder financial abuse. For the first time in 3 years, I felt like I belonged somewhere. The fallout was immediate and severe for my family. By January 2nd, the local news had run a full investigation into Marcus's fraud. The district attorney, who'd let the case languish after my grandmother's death, suddenly found renewed interest when public pressure mounted. Marcus was arrested on January 5th. My parents hired a lawyer, not for Marcus's defense, but to contest my grandmother's will. They claimed she'd been mentally incompetent when she'd made the changes. Catherine Brennan demolished that argument with medical records, witness testimony from my grandmother's doctors, and documented evidence of her sharp mind right up until her final days. The will contest lasted 3 months and cost my parents over $100,000 in legal fees. They lost spectacularly. The judge ruled that not only was the will valid, but my parents had engaged in tortious interference by preventing my grandmother and me from communicating. They were ordered to pay my legal fees. Marcus took a plea deal in March. 5 years probation, full restitution, and a felony record. My father's business reputation took a massive hit. Several clients quietly moved to other firms, not wanting to be associated with a family that enabled fraud against an elderly woman. But the most satisfying consequence came in April. I was having coffee at a Davidson cafe when Vanessa walked in. She froze when she saw me, her face a mixture of anger and something that looked like shame. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. I considered refusing, but curiosity won. 5 minutes. She sat down across from me, looking exhausted. Mom and Dad are selling the house. They can't afford it anymore after the legal fees and everything. Marcus is living with them in a rental. Dad's practice is barely surviving. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, meaning it despite everything. Are you? Her voice cracked. Elena, I didn't know. About Marcus stealing from Grandma. They told me she was just being difficult, that you'd poisoned her against us. I believed them because I wanted to believe them. You didn't question why I was suddenly excluded from everything? I did, but she wiped her eyes. Mom said you'd chosen to distance yourself. That you thought you were better than us. I was so stupid. You were loyal to them. That's not stupid, it's just misplaced. Vanessa looked at me with something like desperation. I read Grandma's letters. Catherine gave me copies during the will contest. She wanted me to see what really happened. Elena, she talked about how proud she was of you. How you were the only one who refused to compromise your integrity. And we punished you for it. I didn't know what to say. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Vanessa continued. I know I don't deserve it. But I needed you to know that I understand now. What we did to you, what I did to you, was unforgivable. You were right about Marcus. You were right about all of it. She stood to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, you look happy. Really happy. I'm glad you got away from us. I watched her walk out, and I realized she was right. I was happy. Genuinely, deeply happy for the first time in years. I'd renovated my grandmother's house, turning her craft room into a home office, where I'd started a consulting business helping families navigate elder care and financial planning. The work was meaningful and clients found me through the news coverage. I'd reconnected with old friends and made new ones. I'd started dating someone I'd met at a community fundraiser, someone with integrity and kindness who reminded me what healthy relationships looked like. My family's rejection, which had felt like a devastating loss, had actually been a gift. It had freed me from a toxic system where enabling bad behavior was valued over accountability, where keeping up appearances mattered more than doing what was right. That Christmas, 1 year after being excluded from my family's celebration, I hosted dinner at my house for 15 people. Jennifer brought her partner. David brought his kids. Sarah came with her husband. My new boyfriend helped me cook. We ate my grandmother's recipes, told stories about her, and raised glasses in her honor. There was no drama. No one was drunk and belligerent. No one expected me to stay silent about uncomfortable truths. No one's bad behavior was excused or enabled. It was the best Christmas I'd ever had. In February, I received a letter from Marcus. He'd written it as part of his court-ordered therapy, though his lawyer made clear I was under no obligation to read it or respond. I almost threw it away, but something made me open it. The letter was surprisingly self-aware. He acknowledged his addiction to gambling, which had fueled the theft. He admitted he'd been enabled his entire life and had never learned to function as an independent adult. He expressed genuine remorse for stealing from our grandmother and recognized that his actions had destroyed her health and peace of mind in her final years. I don't expect forgiveness, he wrote. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that you were right to call out my behavior. If someone had done it years ago, maybe things would be different. Maybe Grandma would still be here. I'll carry that guilt for the rest of my life. I didn't respond, but I didn't throw the letter away either. I filed it with my grandmother's documents, part of the full record of what had happened. In April, my parents' house sold. I heard through Davidson's gossip network that they'd moved to a modest apartment in Huntersville. My father's practice had stabilized, but never recovered its previous prestige. My mother had stopped attending her social clubs, unable to face the whispers and judgment. Part of me felt bad for them. They were my parents, after all, and watching their lives unravel wasn't satisfying the way I'd once imagined it might be. But I also recognized that these were natural consequences of their choices. They'd prioritized protecting Marcus over doing what was right. They'd enabled fraud, isolated family members, and lied to cover up crimes. The fallout wasn't my doing, it was theirs. In June, on what would have been my grandmother's 85th birthday, I planted a garden in her honor. Roses, her favorite. As I worked the soil, I thought about everything she'd taught me. About integrity. About standing up for what's right even when it costs you. About the difference between family and relatives. Relatives are people you're born with, she used to say. Family are people who show up for you, who support you, who love you even when it's hard. Sometimes they're the same. Sometimes they're not. She'd been right. My relatives had failed me spectacularly. But I'd built a family, a chosen family of people who valued honesty, kindness, and mutual support. And I'd inherited not just her estate, but her legacy of integrity. That night, I posted a photo of the rose garden on Instagram with a simple caption, "For Grandma, who taught me that doing the right thing is never the wrong choice. Miss you every day." Within an hour, I had hundreds of comments. People sharing their own stories of family financial abuse. People thanking me for speaking out. People who'd been inspired to set boundaries with toxic relatives. The news coverage had resonated far beyond Charlotte, and I'd inadvertently become a voice for people dealing with similar situations. I started a blog, sharing resources about elder financial abuse, how to recognize manipulation tactics, and strategies for maintaining boundaries with toxic family members. It grew quickly, and by fall, I'd been invited to speak at conferences about family dynamics and financial exploitation. My grandmother had given me more than money and property. She'd given me purpose, validation, and the courage to build a life on my own terms. This Thanksgiving, I hosted dinner again. 23 people crowded into my dining room, laughing and sharing food and creating new traditions. As I looked around the table, I realized this was everything my grandmother had wanted for me, a life full of genuine connection, surrounded by people who lifted me up instead of tearing me down. Someone asked me to share what I was grateful for. I raised my glass. I'm grateful for my grandmother, who loved me enough to tell me the truth even when it was hard. I'm grateful for everyone here, who showed me what real family looks like. And I'm grateful for the hardest year of my life, because it taught me that sometimes the people who push you away are actually giving you the freedom to fly. My phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. Happy Thanksgiving. I hope you're surrounded by people who deserve you. I smiled and put the phone away. I was. As the evening wound down and guests began leaving, Jennifer pulled me into a hug. Your grandmother would be so proud of who you've become. I hope so, I said. I know so. You took everything she taught you and built something beautiful out of all that pain. That's legacy. After everyone left, I sat on the porch in the cold November air, wrapped in one of my grandmother's quilts. The house was quiet, the lake was still, and for the first time since that awful Christmas when I'd eaten frozen lasagna alone, I felt completely at peace. My family hadn't invited me to Christmas last year, had actively excluded me, had even hidden my grandmother's death from me. They'd meant it as punishment, as a way to hurt me for refusing to enable dysfunction. Instead, they'd set me free. And when the world saw who I celebrated New Year's with, people who actually loved me, in a house I'd inherited because my grandmother recognized my integrity, the truth came out. Not just about the fraud and the manipulation, but about what really matters in life. It's not about blood relation or keeping up appearances. It's about choosing people who choose you back. It's about building a life that reflects your values, even when it costs you everything familiar. It's about recognizing that sometimes the greatest gift isn't what you receive, but what you're finally free to release. My grandmother knew that. And now, so do I.